Lochoya sampo pagyo trashi pa tuche tempe trinle yarngada belge drolor tsampe zeparachi pande alame shabla solvade Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Man Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishas Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Sid Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishas Anekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sanekar Uta Varda Nishri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Dagi Jitsun Lama Tuje Che Nyamda Dala Tuje Siksu So Gebe Shesan Dala Tendo So Oyon Sunge Nawa Tsedo So Tseche Ningne Sowa Debe Tse Dechen Korlo Visu Lekshu Ne Yila Sambe Deden Malepa Geme Lungi Drubra Chingi Lo Tsoni Sodan Dikden Shape Tse Dingi Namke Yinsu Lekshu Ne Lapchen Son Cheran Yedun Chamra Chingi Loba Chancho Parge Ninsen Tukun Tu Niu Peme Siudru Lekshun Chancho Drube Gegen Kunshi Shi Tungen Dela Drubra Chingi Lo Dagi Lona Chola Chokpa Dan Chomin Samchur Ngemba Shiwa Chodan Tumbe Dudun Malupa Bemel Hungi Drubra Chingi Lo Dorna Tengne Tserawa Tamche Dan Techi Pardu Nekaba Tamche Tu Rese Kyamne Lama Kele Me Tuche Chingi Dala Siksu So Gongyab Drewe Nyamta Dachala Jetsun Lame Tuche Kudan Sungi Nawa Drame Tu Nyamsu Nyongwe Kesan Tobrasho Kewa Kundu Yanda Lama Dan Drame Cheki Pela Long Cheching Sadan Lamgi Yunde Rabzone Dorje Changi Koban Nyur Tobasho Pakyuki Kudan Dagi Alu Pakyuki Sundan Dagi Nga Pakyuki Tukdan Dagi Yi Ten Yerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Makyuki Kudan Dagi Alu Makyuke Sundan Dagi Nga Makyuke Tudan Dagi Yi Ten Yerme Chiktu Chingi Alu Om Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Shakyamuni Swaha Sashipeke Choshimeto Tramari Rabalingshi Nide Gempadi Sangye Shintu Mikte Ulwarki Drokuna Namanda Shingla Chepara Shoye Damanguru Ratna Mandrala Kam Niryatayami Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam Lai Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dage Jinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shua Sangye Chedan Soge Chonam Lai Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Chi Dage Chushe Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Drupara Shua Sangye Chedan Tsoge Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dage Chinso Gibe Sonam Ki Drola Pinchira Sangye Druparashu.
In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I take refuge in enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Good morning. There are quite a few instruments in our life to interact, to live life, let's say. We interact with many aspects, physical, emotional, material, so many things. But amongst all these, I'd say one of the most important instruments we have is the name. I don't mean what's my name. I mean the value they attribute to things, the name that we give to things, to everything, to situations, to people, to places, to objects, and also to ourselves. When I say name, it's a concept, which sometimes we use the term mental image, or the correct term would be generalized meaning. a concept, mental image that we attribute to something. Whatever we look at around us, can take anything from a person, which is quite a complex phenomenon, to something which at first seems simple. For example, this little glass heart, for example, or the flower that I have next to me, whatever it is. We look at the object and we say, this is a little glass heart. That is a flower. And it seems so simple. But when we say a little glass heart or flower, together with that name, there are concepts, characteristics, functions, which we attribute to that object. And however much we can, we try to analyze, look at the object in 1,000 ways, it's difficult for us, I'd say impossible nearly, to see all the aspects of this object. It's difficult to see the various aspects of prospects and characteristics that this object has. So when we see an object and we give a name, we are as if it's as if we were highlighting just part of that object and leaving the rest in the dark. I don't know if that's clear or not. Let's imagine a huge page with so many words, but then we just highlight just one line, and the rest is as if it didn't exist. But then we can highlight another line, but we'll never manage to have a total vision of the object. Also because there are certain parts that in our view that seem contradictory. So it seems that that can't be so. Therefore, when we see something, we take just a tiny part of that thing, and we believe that part is the object. This is, for example, a little glass heart with it. That is a flower. But if I'm not mistaken, it's a white camellia. I don't know. Here in Albagnano, I'm becoming better at naming flowers, but I'm still not very good. But if somebody comes to us who's seen a different part, who highlighted a different part, for example, he might say, that's not a flower. Might have another vision, another name. And what would I say? I'd say, you're wrong. Why? Because you have a vision which is different from mine. And the point I want to make here is that when we give a name to something, we are highlighting just a small part. And unfortunately, part of that which we highlight, that the value that we give, can be reflected in the object or the person. And there's a part, but sometimes we give values or functions which cannot be sustained by the object or the person. I don't know if that's clear. For example, I may attribute to an object a characteristic that the object doesn't have the capacity to sustain. That's called an erroneous view. But it's common when we give a name, a value to something, part of the characteristics that we give can be maintained and the part not. The real problem is not even that. The real problem is that we, in a spontaneous, natural way, not conceptual, we are convinced that that name that we have given, the value that we have attributed, is the reality, is the object. This is the person. This is the situation. And not our perception of something. not a value that we attribute to something that has so many other aspects, perspectives, other characteristics that I am not able to see. Okay? What's one of the most transformative experiences that we can have regarding a place or a situation, a person, and so on? It's when we change our perspective on something, when we manage to have the object in front of us, but we look at it from another point of view. And we say, well, it's not necessarily how I said it was. There are other aspects which I didn't see before, we didn't see before, which at first seem contradictory. There are these optical illusions, objects that, when you look at them from a certain perspective, seem to have a certain shape, then you take another perspective, seem to have another shape. But this is because, depending on where I find myself, the perspective that I have a certain way of seeing it. But we must be aware it's just one way of seeing things. It's not the way. It's not the reality. And here we need humility, because very often we're very presumptuous, believing that we see things as they really are. We believe we're right. But it's not a conceptual thing, it's something much more spontaneous, and also in the most banal everyday things, trivial everyday things. Now, one of the deepest experiences that we can have regarding a person, a place, or an object, or a situation, is that when we manage to change perspective and to see that thing in a different way. And the most incredible thing is, even if the object, let's say, is immobile, doesn't change, static, when we change perspective, the object transforms. Also in a very radical way. Because the object that we perceive is made up of characteristics that we see. Because, how can I explain this better? When I see something, how does it work? I see an image. It's light that arrives to my eyes, and these signals are perceived by the visual consciousness. And I receive all these signals. How does that work inside us? We try to understand what we see on the basis of on what we know already, on references, what is similar that I've already seen, which is similar to what I'm seeing now. And what is similar, I highlight. And what doesn't make any sense to me, I put apart. And the end, and we say, this is it, this is this. But at a certain point, what can happen, that we can instead, we can be conscious, and because we reflect, we see other aspects that were there before, but we didn't see. And we see that the object arises in a different way. We see something behind it. We can see this in paintings, shapes. We see this often. Therefore, what I see, what exists for me, and what arrives to my eyes, in some way, I manage to perceive the other parts is in inverted commas, as if it weren't there in inverted commas. This is what is. When I open my vision, change perspective, what happens? I make myself more open and aware to aspects that I didn't see before. And so my reality changes. That's how I perceive it. Therefore, first of all, it's most important to be aware that when we see something, when we hear, listen to somebody, when we reflect on a subject, whatever it may be, we are seeing one perspective, one part, that and to which we attribute values, some of which correspond to the object itself or not. That there are wrong views. We do attribute values that cannot be maintained. But where I wanted to get to is that these transformative experiences that transform our relationship with the situation, with the object, with the person, when we change perspective. And we can change perspective and not eliminate the previous perception. We can see that both of them are valid, and we have a wider vision, and they're not contradictory. Is that clear? How that may happen with a situation or with a person? One of the examples I've given many times, when I was explaining that the past is impermanent, not impermanent from the point of view what happened changes. What happened changes because my perspective changes. And the value I give, that's what makes the past impermanent. I can't live through anything independently from the values that I give, my perspective, that the imputation of the name. When I change perspective, the object changes. When I change perspective for the past changes. The example I give often, I'm walking along the street, somebody pushes me, I fall on the ground, I break an arm, I break my arm. It's really painful. I call the ambulance, etc., etc. I'm in hospital, terrible pain in my arm, and at a certain point, the police come. So how do we feel towards the person who pushed us out? Is it gratitude, aversion, indifference? I'd say probably sentiment of aversion. How dare you push me like that? I did nothing to you. I don't even know who you are, and you pushed me. You caused me harm. And from that, we can have hate, vendetta. And when the police arrive, we have footage of the incident, and we wanted to show it to you. So we look at the footage, the film, and we see in the footage that behind us there was an armed raid, armed robbery, and they were shooting in our direction. While the person I looked at, the person who pushed me, saw this, and he actually saved our lives. He moved us out of the way, and that way saved our lives. We fall on the ground, and the bullet passed straight past us and ends up somewhere else and doesn't hurt us. And therefore the police saying, I'm sorry. The police say, sorry about your arm, but actually this person saved your life. What happens? The arm still hurts. But the sensation that we have when we ask, what happened today? What happens to the sensation? Do I say, they hurt me or they saved my life? We say they saved my life. Therefore, the sentiment in this case towards the person who pushed us is the same or changes. If we have aversion, if we still have aversion, do we have aversion or gratitude? Gratitude. The situation is exactly the same in part. It's not as if we went back and the time machine went back and changed something. No, but we change perspective. We change our way of seeing things, and changing that, reality change too. Our sentiments, our emotions, sensations with regard to that specific event changed. When we feel the pain in our arm in winter, when it still hurts, where the fracture is, instead of saying that bastard pushed me on the ground and I broke my arm, it revives the sensation of gratitude. There's a different memory. He saved my life. So in that way, the past changed. Okay? The important thing is that when we allow ourselves this process, transformative process, reality changes and our experience changes, our way of living changes, and often having a different perspective, which doesn't mean that that exists and that doesn't, because very often there are different perspectives that are valid. The question is not so much what's the real perspective, because there are many real valid perspectives. The question is, I'm sorry I'm saying it this way, the one we tend to use, I'm sorry if I have to say, is the one that suits me more. At the end of the day, the one that suits me, where I feel better with other people, that gives me a sense of peace and joy, etc. And I'd say the most marvelous, incredible part is that at the same time, in the same way that we relate to every situation with different perspectives, in the same way that we relate with every object, and we remember, even if I see the object through one perspective, one vision, let's remember part of our vision is true, the object can sustain it, and the other part is not real, and the object can't sustain what the other part of our view. The important thing is that in truth we live as if our perspective was the truth, the reality. We're not conscious of the fact that it's our perspective. So the first step is to remember that we live live reality through our perspective, imputation of the name, attributed values, etc. The incredible thing is that in the same way that we do this with everything around us, we also do it with ourselves. Okay? Since we were tiny kids, we were brought up in a context in which, how can I say this? We have gradually generated an identity, imagine of ourselves, a perspective of ourselves. And this image that we have of ourselves, who am I, the perspective through which we see ourselves, first of all, is just one perspective, even if it appears to us as if it were the reality, the truth. I am this. This is not me, however. This is just one characteristic, and part of what I see, which is true and some not true. And some are sustained by me and some are not, as it happens with other objects. But it's one perspective amongst many, many, many that exist. And what happens every now and again when we allow ourselves to look around and see things another way and see that in ourselves characteristics, contradictory characteristics. Are there any or not? If there's somebody who says, I don't have any contradictory characteristics, you're either a Buddha, which I hope, or you're so fixed in one perspective that you can't see the other characteristics. But everybody, or each one of us, has contradictory characteristics. But very often our tendency is, when we see these contradictory aspects, we deny one or the other, the existence of one or the other. Why? But one of the reasons is that because if my perspective is the truth, the other can't be the truth. It's either one or the other. And here we get into conflict when we're actually a mix of things. We have many contradictory aspects. And in the same way that when I look at a situation, who pushed me and made me break my arm, I can see different perspectives. Did they hurt me or not? The answer is the answer is yes. He pushed me, I fell. He committed a violent act towards me. Yes, that's true. But at the same time, looking at it from the other side, he saved my life or not? Yes. He did me good? Yes. Well, which is right and which is wrong? Both are right. The question is, which of the two perspectives is good for me? One will help me to create aversion, rancor, and the other will help me to generate gratitude and love. That sentiment that I'm lucky. Wow, he saved my life. How lucky I am. Not how unlucky I am that this guy pushed me and I broke my arm. So it depends on perspective that we take. Both are correct. But which is that which makes me feel better? At the same time, both are true. And in the same way that both are true, that both are untrue. Because neither are absolute, they're relative. Because there are many other possibilities as well. What happens when we look at ourselves? We see that we have many, many, many aspects. And amongst these aspects that we have, one of the experiences which are most transformative that we can have with regards to ourselves is that to change our identity. We often say, I want to change myself. I want to be different. We want to go to the gym, a different hairstyle, do different things to change ourselves. I have to change this habit. I must not react like this in this way. I want to do this on the other way. That's okay. That's fine. But the most powerful way to transform ourselves, our being, is to change the perspective of ourselves, our own identity. And this is one of the things that Vajrayana Buddhist practices, which we do continually. It's called abandoning the appearance and to grasping to the ordinary appearance and to develop an identity and appearance where we use pride. We use the word pride, divine pride. Developing divine pride, which is an identity that looks at the side of the qualities and not at defects, mental defilements, etc., conflicts. I'm simplifying too much, let's say, but the important thing is that if I identify myself with my qualities, if I identify myself with the fact that I'm a who has love, patience, joy, I'm somebody who wants the best for other people, I identify myself with virtuous aspects, positive in myself, because when there are others which will manifest themselves, I'm saying I'm not those aspects. I'm not giving space to nourish those characteristics because it's not what I identify with. I find myself in a situation. The way I react to that situation is strongly influenced by the way I see myself, how I identify myself, the identity I have. For example, we can see is when somebody works in theatre, television, or cinema, whatever it is, he has to take the role of somebody. And there are various stories of actors who had to take on a character for a long time. For example, the soap operas in Brazil, where an actor has to take the part of a certain character for a long, long time, and there comes a moment in which the actor, when he isn't acting, he impersonates that person. There's a kind of a symbiosis between the character and the actor, where the actor has difficulty to be himself and not the character that he's playing. I've got a friend who's an actress, a disciple of Rinpoche, saying how difficult it is to play the part of a son for a long time because it's very difficult to get out of the role. There are certain aspects of the character of the person that I'm playing, the character that I'm playing, that interfere when I'm not acting. This is an example of when I generate an identity, and I react as a consequence of that. It's like theatre. Gradually, I become that identity. The identity becomes stronger, more spontaneous. This doesn't mean that we need to pretend to be, to be false. No, absolutely not. But it means that we can identify with certain aspects rather than others. And this is effectively one of the most powerful instruments that we have. We don't need to pretend that those aspects don't exist, but we can identify ourselves with others. And let's remember, I'm not a person, an angry person, or jealous, or envious, loving, patient. I have anger, jealousy, envy. I have various aspects, and I'm a mixture of things. Here too, one of the aspects is not to judge our person, not say, I am this, but I have this characteristic. Yesterday I was talking about Vajrasattva. I was talking about the sky. The sky is not dark. It's not one way. It has many clouds. There's a big difference. The sky is not... It's not one way. It has a characteristic in that moment. In the same way, I'm not an angry person. I have anger. I'm not an envious person or whatever. I have envy. I have that aspect in that moment. Therefore, I'm acting the sentiment, the action, the thought, and not the person. Starting with myself and also others as well. Because in the same way, we can see an aspect of ourselves rather than others. In the same way, the same thing happens with other people. But with regards to ourselves, this is really important. And one of the most important aspects, valuable aspects, is to start, first of all, from understanding, not conceptually, but also reflecting and feeling that what I see, what I perceive, what I feel is not the truth, is not reality. It's one aspect of reality which I project, even with regards to myself. Okay? Let's make an example. What is this object? It's not a rhetoric question. You can answer without fear. What is this object? It's a bell, right? We all agree? Okay, this is a bell. We all agree on that. Now, let's say, from now on, I say this is... We're not going to call it a bell anymore. We're not going to use it as a bell. We're not going to... It's not a bell. We're going to change perspective. This object is a cup, which we're going to use to drink water. Okay? Can it work? Does it work as a cup? Does it fulfill the functions of a cup? Oh, somebody might say no, because you can't put it down, but I've seen cups, paper cups in the airport that are cone-shaped and you can't place on a service. Can it fulfill the functions of a cup? Well, if somebody says no, okay, let's try it. It's a bit dirty, though. So what happens is that in this moment, this object is no longer a bell. Okay, all we have to do is to turn it upside down. We change perspective. It's no longer a bell. From now on, it is a glass. Every time we come to the gamba, we use this new glass. What happens at this point? We're going there. Oh, Lama said this. Okay, it's a bit strange. Okay, let's drink from this cup. And somebody might say, this is sacrilege because it's a sacred object. Another person might say, man, no, it's nectar, immortality. God knows what people might say. But simply put, what happens is that when we take this object and we use it as a glass and we call it glass, for us, what happens? What happens is it a glass or is it a glass or a bell that functions also as a glass? How does it appear to us? How does it appear to us? We see it as a bell, which can double up as a glass. Because, like it or not, we see this as a bell. We can't help it. And the same thing saying that person is a bad person. Even in this person, he's doing something good, but he's a bad person. What I want to say is that the object appears to us as a bell. I see that this is a bell. I attribute the name bell and the characteristics of a bell, and as if these characteristics were intrinsic in the object, and as if they didn't depend on my perspective and the way I look at things. Therefore, what do I have to do to see this as a bell and not as as a glass and not as a bell? How can I make sure that I see it now as a bell, as a glass for me? What I have to do is to kill the bell. I have to take away the concept of bell. I have to deconstruct the concept of bell. And at this point, and I remain with something, and I can that leaves room for the new thing. This is because we have this projection, this grasping attachment to reality, which is very, very strong. And the object appears to us as if it existed on the basis of the values that we attribute. And we don't see this relationship. The first time we saw this, the first time we saw such an object, we didn't know it was a bell. We didn't know. We all grew up in the same cultural context, same education. We have similar concept on the basis of this. That's why everybody says this is a bell. But I remember a friend who worked with indigenous people. He had two experiences, which similar to this. So today he went to the indigenous people. One day he went to the people. He said, "Des, we're going to see. Now we're going to see what is ice cream. Let's have the experience. Let's give them ice cream. Let's give them a new experience with indigenous people." So they went to the supermarket. They took a big liter box of ice cream, and when he was paying, one of the indigenous people who didn't know anything, had never seen ice cream, and he opened it, and there was 45 degrees the temperature. He took the ice cream and he put it all over his body. He said, "Oh, this is wonderful. It's really cooling, refreshing." And he wasn't wrong. Maybe it was a bit sticky, but it fulfilled that function. And in the same way, he went to a tribe in the middle of the forest who had absolutely no contact with the outside world. And one girl came up to him, "I have an object from your civilization, but when it came, it didn't work, but I improved it, I made it work." And he said, "Okay, oh. And it's really useful for us." And she came with a chair, with a structure in iron. But indigenous people don't have the concept of chair. They don't use chairs. They usually sit squatting, which is actually much better for your health. They don't have constipation, for example. But anyway, apart from all that, it's much more healthy. But apart from all that, and he got there and he finds this chair, Frasa chair. But there was this. But they took the seat out and they put a grill to make meat, because there was a kind of grill of iron, and on which there was a wooden part to sit on. They took that away, and they were left with this grill, in inverted commas, which they used to cook meat and fish. What I want to say is that when we see something, when we see a situation, an object, a person, whatever it may be, we attribute a meaning. But for us, we're not aware. And the meaning that we attribute, and we see the meaning that we attribute, we see it as something coming from the object, not from ourselves. I don't know if that's clear. And this is the first step, which is really important to understand when we see people, when we see situations, anything, and also even when we see ourselves. Therefore, let's start from the assumption that reality around us is also myself, and also myself appears as if it were something solid, predefined, which in fact isn't. For example, this is not a bell in an intrinsic, independent independent, objective way. It's a bell, but it's a bell in a subjective, because it can sustain the functions of a bell which I attribute, but it's not a bell in an autonomous, independent, objective way, intrinsic way, in the object itself. The same happens to me. That's how I see myself, and you too, how you see yourself. And one of the most fundamental points is to realize and to understand that I am not that which I see myself to be. Because I see myself as if I existed in a totally autonomous, independent, in the values that I attribute. I see a very small part and I say, I am that. And when we manage to take that away, and when we manage to open ourselves to other possibilities, and when we open ourselves to a new identity, a new perspective, we have to live a kind of a crisis, a situation of crisis in which we experience that identity that we had is no longer sustainable, and I have to reinvent myself. In the Vajrayana practice tradition, what we do is, in order to give us a new identity, we simulate death. An image of death, of us dying, to take away this attachment, this ordinary image, so-called, of ourselves, and on the basis of that, and with the very subtle body, mind and body, when we die, we can create this new identity. But if we start simply with it, well, it's not simply, but let's say when we start to see that I am not that which I believe I am. What I believe myself to be has characteristics which can be sustained, and there are other characteristics which I see that are not sustained. So there are real and unreal aspects of myself, and that goes for each one of you and everything we see. And the most important thing is that I can change my perspective. I can change the way in which I relate to myself. And this is the deepest, the most powerful change that we can make, and brings so many consequences with it. And this is important, to identify ourselves with our own qualities, with virtuous aspects of ourselves, specific, joyful aspects. And therefore, the more I identify myself in this way, the more I live with that identity, the more I react with that identity. If I see myself an abandoned, dissatisfied, lonely person, I will react in that way. I will nourish that identity. I will reinforce that identity. Therefore, it's very important the way we see ourselves, the way we relate with ourselves. Yesterday, when we're doing the mantra Vajrasattva, which is one of the explanations of this mantra, the Samaya being, the commitment being becomes stable, may it become stable, and actually in ourselves. And then we say, Vajrasattva Samaya Manupalaya Dhanapatrichuda, Vajrasattva, be present, be real, recognize in this beat where I'm now, recognize the potential I have in my qualities, my potential to be a Buddha, where I lack inherent existence, And I don't exist in the way I see myself in an inherent objective way. I have all the prerequisites to become a Buddha. It's not that I'm a Buddha and I don't know it, but I'm not a person who's intrinsically suffering and angry. Just these aspects are momentarily present, like the cloud in the sky. I don't identify myself with the clouds which are momentarily passing. The mantra says, and the part which says, be stable, be satisfied with me, be satisfied with me, until we say, love me with compassion. If one of the readings is, we recognize our nature in the sense that it's interdependent. We're not intrinsically suffering beings. But this is just one perspective in which we've become trapped. We get out of this. We allow ourselves to get out of this. May I have a vision of myself in a better way as a Buddha? May I be stable in this? May I love myself in a deepest way? Because when I recognize my true nature in a state of bliss, love and wisdom, when I recognize myself in that, may I obtain the realizations and act in all situations with clarity. What great joy. And with this, I'm going to react and act with for the benefit of all sentient beings, with joy and wisdom, maintaining my commitment to be of service to the other, to help others, and helping others to be in peace too. That's one of the meanings of this mantra. So we need to remember our true nature, the perspective with which we want to see ourselves. And this is, in Tantra, it's called bringing the result into the path. Today, I'm a Buddha. No. Have I got the potential to be a Buddha? Yes. Therefore, I act as if I were Buddha. I see myself as if I were a Buddha until gradually I become a Buddha. And I'm identifying myself ever more with my qualities, with my virtuous aspects, with positive aspects, and I reinforce these and not the opposite. Okay. This doesn't mean that we close our eyes and pretend that the bad things aren't there. It's like having a kind of dual personality. When the other aspects arise, we embrace them. We don't block them. We don't follow them. We don't identify ourselves with them. We let them go by like the clouds, because I'm not that. Okay.
Lame kutse rapten chin namkara trinle chokchurge padang losan tembe drume sasumgi drove munse taktu ne gyurchi kewa kuntu yanda lama dang drame chöki pela longche chin sadan lamge yönte rabzone dorje change kopa nyurtobsho nimo dele tsendele Nime kuyan delek shin yinsen takto delek pe kuncho sumki chingi lobo kuncho sumki ngodrubo tsol kuncho sumki trashisho.
At dawn or dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness. Tashidele. Have a nice day, everyone.